Hi everyone, my name is Kim C. I'm a university fiction teacher specializing in fiction workshop, and this is my one-woman, lecture-style Stephen King podcast called The Year of Underrated Stephen King. I've been at this podcasting thing for about 4 years now, and one of the most rewarding things I like to explore on this show is the constant reader interview, where the journey and depth of experience Stephen King fans have had over their years of reading gets center stage. Today's constant reader interview guest is a Colorado horror fiction author who has been a Stephen King fan since way back, like all the way back, before you and I turned double digits. The fiction of Kalvin Ellis brings us the recurring main character of Paisley Mott. Oh, what a name! I am sold on that name alone. We first meet this Paisley Mott, paranormal investigator, in the novel In the Hills Above the Gristmill, followed by the sequel, In the Grave Where the Bones Are Still Wet. For those who quickly fall in love with the fiction of Mr. Ellis, he also has some middle grade fiction specifically titled Don't Turn Around from the Fright Vision's Cursed Coin series. My time with Mr. Ellis certainly brought fresh, and I'm talking fresh, from the farm constant reader interview answers that really made me smile. Mr. Ellis definitely did his homework, and it shows. But most importantly, Mr. Kalvin Ellis bravely and candidly reminded me about the hell, heartache, and hope this life can bring, and how art, specifically the art of Stephen King, can oftentimes slide into the cracks where things are broken, and bring us joy, inspiration, community, and make those hard things, those dark things, they become precious things. Hopefully, if you were in the Las Vegas area this weekend, the last weekend of October 2024, Mr. Kalvin Ellis was guest of honor at the first ever Stephen King convention, appropriately named KingCon, where there was a jam-packed schedule filled with Stephen King experts, filmmakers, book collectors, panels, and Mr. Kalvin Ellis was signing books and being his rad self, and hopefully you got to shake his hand and meet this incredible creative. Boys and girls, I am gutted I could not attend KingCon. I'm absolutely devastated the stars did not align for this timing window, but you can bet I'm going to be at next year's KingCon ready to party. To those who did go, I hope it was wonderful, and I hope you got to meet Mr. Kalvin Ellis and scoop up some of his stories. Alright, lovelies, I shan't dilly-dally any further because I really want you guys to dig into this interview full force because it's very, very special. Let us now jump into this awesome exploration of a life spent in Stephen King's writing with horror fiction author Kalvin Ellis. All right, dear listeners, it is with great pleasure that I introduce today's constant reader interview. This is horror author Kalvin Ellis. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Year of Underrated Stephen King, Kalvin. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much. It is such a huge honor and privilege to be here.
Oh, you sweetly. I so appreciate you. Thank you so much. I'm excited to dive in as I'm looking at your hat, which has red rum stitched into the cap, so I know I've got the right guy. This is the first question to kick off all constant reader interviews. Mr. Ellis, how old were you when you read your very first Stephen King title, and what was it?
So I started way younger than any person should, and I'll have to go back a little bit to really properly set the scene. When I was 4, my older brother thought it would be really funny to lock me in a bedroom and force me to watch Children of the Corn. And so he locked me in and came back, and as soon as it was over, I said, I want to watch it again. And I just fell in love with horror at that point. And so then, fast forward a couple of years, I was 8 or 9 years old, and my parents owned a little video store here in Colorado. And next door to the video store was a bookstore, a used bookstore. The kind that was pulled directly out of a Stephen King novel. And I used to spend a lot of time over there, and I saw a book sitting on a shelf, and I pointed at it and I said, hey, that's that guy that makes those movies. And Brock, the guy that owned the bookstore, said, that's Stephen King. That's the guy that writes those books that those movies are based on. And that book was it. And I said, well, can I read it? And he said, as long as your mom doesn't care. And she didn't. And so I would sit under this little like teepeed bookshelf that was just like sagging under the weight of all the books. And he told me I couldn't take it out because it was still relatively new and very popular at the time. And so he said I could read it in the store. And so I would just climb under this little shelf and sit there and read it at 8 or 9 years old. There was huge parts of it that I didn't understand, but I absolutely fell in love with it.
Oh, that's a good one. That'll do it. Very cool. Our second question is asking the constant reader, how many have we read? And it's not to compare so much as to let me know where you're at on your journey. So are you the constant reader who has read everything, maybe more than once? Or have you hopscotched around and taken the road less traveled?
The only one I haven't read of the novels and major collections is Gwendy's Final Task. I've read everything else, and multiple times for most of them.
Oh, very nice. Okay, that's always very helpful. This question, having read everything, do you have a Stephen King title that you love, 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 but you've noticed it might be a little underrated per se, and maybe it doesn't have the same love from everyone else, and vice versa? What is one that you've noticed, dang, I don't get the hype?
So one of my favorites, and I think I would probably put it even in my top 5, is Bag of Bones. And I noticed a lot of people just don't talk about that book as much. They don't seem to like it as much. It's more of like your typical ghost story, I would say, that doesn't have a whole lot of action, doesn't have a lot of the flair that a lot of Stephen King novels have, but it's creepy and it's eerie and it's got beautiful characters in it. So I just love Bag of Bones, but I noticed a lot of people don't really talk about that one as much. As far as one that I dislike that others do, I don't really think so. I think I don't love Dreamcatcher. I didn't dislike it by any stretch of the imagination, but I just didn't like it as much. I like Desperation, but not Regulators as much as I like Desperation. But there's none that I don't really like. And so I wouldn't say that there's any that other people like that I don't.
Good to know. Follow-up question. Listeners of the show know I'm a little bit broken record. I promise I won't go too deep into this issue, but I do have a few problems with Bag of Bones. But I do like it a lot. I felt it was a very strong Gothic novel. I appreciated what he was doing, but it just didn't land well for me. I think the ending has haunted me to my soul. So I guess with Bag of Bones, yeah, aside from what you've already mentioned, how could we rebrand this? How could we resell? How would you be on the marketing campaign for Bag of Bones?
Good question. How would I market Bag of Bones? I would probably make it a Richard Bachman novel if I had to.
Smart.
Because I think going into Bag of Bones, expecting the usual Stephen King, you might be a little disappointed, especially when they say that he can't stick the landing on endings. I believe that's one of the books that they're probably referencing when they say that. Because like you said, it does have some issues. It meanders a lot. We don't need that much detail about a lot of the things that happen. But I think that's a criticism King gets a lot, and it's well earned. He likes to put in every bit of the world, and he's succeeded enough where he can afford to do that. So he can pile in all that extra exposition that not everybody's looking for. If I was trying to sell that, I would probably, if it was somebody that didn't really know Stephen King, I would probably sell it as a Richard Bachman novel and be like, hey, this is a book that if you like this type of stuff, this might be up your alley too. But just prepare your expectations.
Very, very smart. I could get behind this. I could. Bachman, I have a lot more slack for
Yes.
than King. Yes, I'm aware they're the same person, but everybody knows what I'm talking about.
Yes, there is a difference. With Bachman, it felt like he could let himself go a little bit more and didn't have to be on top, especially with the day and age it was happening. I think the only book of the Bachman books that I feel really feels like a Stephen King novel is The Long Walk. But I feel like Bag of Bones could fit right in there with that. Not with The Long Walk specifically.
Very astute. I agree on this. Nice. Okay, at this point, I always get so excited for this question that I battery ram through all the other questions and long jump to this one. So that's what we're going to do. This question is asking about your favorite King villains. Who is in that zone for you?
So it might be an unpopular opinion, and it's a little different, but my favorite of all King villains is probably the Overlook Hotel. I count that as just a villain in itself. And yes, there's multiple villains that come along with it, but the house itself is kind of the entity that they're working against. So I love Eldridge Jonas. I think he's a great villain in Wizard and Glass. There's really like ones that you really just want to hate, like and probably number 2, Big Jim Rennie.
Yeah.
I hate that guy. And he's so well written that he's so easy to hate, which is what you want in a villain. You want to be able to just drop right into disliking them and then just have that build. And I think the Overlook, though, has a little bit of mystery to it, and you never know what you're going to get. Like with a lot of our villains, in Stephen King, just to look out for that one villain. But with the Overlook, they're stuck inside of it. There's nowhere to go. So the desolation and isolation that they feel being stuck there plays into it, and it's just there's such a great atmosphere to it that I would have to say, if I had to pick one villain, love Pennywise, love Flag, love Annie Wilkes, obviously, but it would be the Overlook. And then if I had an honorable mention, Blaine the Mono.
Oh, nice. That's a terrific list. I've never heard this before, Mr. Ellis. I love this. This is such a cool one to unpack because, I love a haunted house, and the Overlook is as haunted as you get.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on the Stanley Hotel, being a Colorado resident?
I've got a picture of it right here. I don't know if you can see it. I go to the Stanley at least once a year just to go visit. I've been on the tours, and I love it. It's such a great place. And it's one of those places that probably wouldn't be in business if it wasn't for Stephen King. Everybody, it's a beautiful hotel. It's great to go visit, but you walk in there and you can feel his presence there. It's fantastic.
I haven't visited yet. I am a big fraidy cat. I intend to someday, for sure. When I reread The Shining, of course, I don't remember if it was last year or this year because time scrambles me as it scrambles us all. But one of the things I had a question about in regards to the Overlook is what exactly is its motivation and is its source of haunting? In your opinion, what do you feel is the battery that makes the Overlook operate?
Ooh, good question. So in the book, they kind of touch on that bad things have happened there and those spirits are still there. But I feel like it's kind of seeped into the very foundation of the place, which King talked about. He has talked about before about his stay at the Stanley. The actual Stanley Hotel is built on a bed of limestone, and so it conducts energy very, very weird. And so he didn't really specifically say that in the book, but it kind of feels like there's that bit there with the Overlook. But he talks about all these bad things happening and how it kind of just sucks the life out of people, which we see with Jack Torrance, which is why Stephen King didn't like the movie as much as he liked the book. Which I totally feel. I love the movie a lot, but it doesn't have the same character development. Jack at the beginning starts as a bad guy and then just gets worse in the movie, whereas in the book, he starts as a good guy who's made a mistake and he's trying to fix his mistakes, and he's doing everything he can to be a good man, a good husband, and a good father. And then the Overlook just kind of takes that away from him. So I think it's just a siphon of people. The Overlook. Sorry, that was very rambly.
No, I love it. I love it. I love it because that really helps me a great deal. Because in my Shining reading, I always struggle with, is it cursed ground or did it start off virginal and fine? Like everything was fine when it was built. The guests of the hotel brought the evil. The hotel became tainted. So I can get on board with this. I really like that a lot. And hold the phone. I did not know about this geological foundation. I didn't know about the limestone.
Yeah, there's just a huge in the Rocky Mountain National Forest. There's huge deposits of limestone, and the hotel's set right on top of one. There's a great episode of the show Ghost Hunters where they go visit and they go through the caves in the basement, and you can actually see the limestone. And they talk a little bit about it in the episode.
Dude, I am a huge believer in rock power because not to go too witchy woo with this, but Arizona, where I live, has a very cool place named Sedona, and the entire city is iron ore. And so that's what makes the rock so red. And people feel that there are vortices in the town. They feel that there's this very special healing energy. They're very attracted to it. I've never really felt it, probably because I've grown up here my whole life and I'm just used to it. But I am such a believer that that is very real. I think that energy and the water in our bodies, this is fascinating. Oh my God. I love this. Thank you, Kalvin. Very, very cool.
Of course. It's a really neat place. And if you start to look at the reasoning behind it, there's lots of cool little relations. And I've heard that about Sedona. I didn't realize that like the entire town, I thought it was just rich in it, but that's really cool.
It's a rad place. It is very hippy dippy, but it's also very picturesque if you just want to bypass the hippy dippy and take some beautiful photos, go on an awesome hike. But a lot of people I've talked to will fly across the country to come to Sedona. And when they're driving into the city limits, they feel an immense quiet. They feel a very stirring peace, a noticeable difference. And so that's just from, I think, the iron ore. I just think it's from the rocks. So if we've got limestone on the foundation of the Stanley, that is so influential to the Overlook. I mean, it's going to soak up energy. It's going to pass around that energy. Oh, I love this. You really opened up a new file cabinet of nerd for me, Kalvin. I appreciate this.
That's what we aim to do.
It's true. Man, I'm a fan. Let's jump to Stephen King film. I am inundated with Stephen King film at present. I'm waiting on The Life of Chuck to finally be given to us, and I'm super excited for Salem's Lot to be released, this new theatrical adaptation. So my question is about your favorites.
The Body, I would have to say, or Stand By Me, is probably my favorite. Just of straight King, because I mean we know and love him for his horror, but his non-horror stuff is just so good, and I feel like it's a little easier to adapt. Because you get Green Mile, which is beautiful, and then of course The Shawshank Redemption, which is one of the most perfect movies ever made. If we're going horror, Paul Tremblay is going to kill me for this, but I do love The Mist, and I will defend that with when Paul was on talking about The Mist and his disdain for it. He mentioned that Miss Carmody lives through the end, but she doesn't. She gets shot by Ollie, which is one of the best parts of the whole story. So maybe he needs to watch it again. But I do love The Mist. Yes, the ending, Frank Darabont's ending, is much different than King's ending, but I really appreciate that too. In the movie, Thomas Jane's character has witnessed all of these things happen. He's witnessed how quickly these animals, these monsters can attack, and just the pain and suffering that comes along with that. And so, yeah, I can see why the decision was made quickly. And I'm sure it wasn't quick. It actually shows them driving for quite a while until they run out of gas, and it just happens to be really bad timing. But yeah, I really love The Mist. It Chapter 1, I think, is amazing and beautiful. I love it. It felt very true to the book in a lot of ways. A little different in certain ways, which, there's things about the book that I really missed. What else? What other ones do I really love? I thought Gerald's Game was done really well. That's probably my favorites. I really love The Shining, but not necessarily as an adaptation, because I do miss the characters. I think it's a great horror movie. I think the symbology and the shots are beautiful, and everything about it is done well, but I just didn't think it really held true to the characters of the book.
I'm with you there. That's for darn sure. All right, this question is a two-parter because I am greedy. So This question is asking about a character you would like to either have a prequel or a sequel. This is someone who you would like to give a lot of runway to. As you know, we have Dany from The Shining. We've got Holly with a very large installment of novels connected to her, which is very cool. Some would say not cool, but that's another day. And as a follow-up, the two-parter was inspired from this question. The roots of the question are, which character would you like to give a sequel or prequel to? And then, because you are a writer, I wanted to ask, as a fiction novelist, if you had a full blessing from Stephen King to write the Firestarter sequel, where would you take Miss Charlie McGee?
All right. So the first part about the sequels or prequels, I would love to know what happens to Jake Epping after 11/22/63, because the ending ends how it should end. The book ends very well, which is not the original way he wanted the book to end. Joe Hill, his son Joe, convinced him to change the ending after he wrote it, and then we got the ending that we have. But I would love to know what happened to Jake in between there. Did he stop using the closet? Like, did he stop time traveling? What did he like? I mean, obviously he doesn't want to keep going back to that same time period, but if he could go visit Sadie occasionally, I think that would be sweet. So yeah, I would like to know what happened to Jake Epping after that. I would love more stories of Roland Deschain. A Bill Hodges prequel would be great.
Ooh, nice.
I could get behind a Bill Hodges prequel. Find out what happened to him during his career. Yeah, those are probably some of them that I would really like to see. What is his name in The Cell? Clay Riddle. I would like to know what happens after Cell. I know everybody hates that book. I don't hate it that much. I think I like it. It's not great, but I had fun with it. But I would like to know what happens to Clay after all of that stuff. So yeah, those are just a couple. I mean, I spend a lot of time thinking about these characters and reading about these characters, and then on rereads, there's what happened before and after a lot. So I could probably go on for days about wanting to know what happens to these characters. As for Charlie, I do have, the first time I heard you ask this question on your podcast, I started thinking about it. And so I've had a bit of time to think about it.
Yay!
And so how long-winded do you want me to be on this? Because I could sum it up quickly, or I could just go into like what I think this story should be.
Let's cross that bridge together. Let's go for it.
Okay.
And I'll pull you back from the edge if it's needed.
That's fair. So I think it'd be fun to start, we come in on Charlie present day. She's in her 50s. She's life has not been fair to her. Obviously, she feels like everything was taken from her. So she has a life full of trauma and abuse, and she has, withheld using her powers because that never led to anything good. And so she's in a really bad spot. She's got an adult daughter herself. Her daughter has a son, Andy, his name is. And we start with them in a gas station, and just to show how she feels like her life is not going the way she wants, the lady right behind her ends up winning the Mega Millions. Like, so if she'd have just bought if she'd have let the lady go in front of her and bought that ticket, she could have won the Mega Millions. And so she's like, this always happens. My life is just terrible. But we find out that her daughter, I have in my head named her Gabrielle. Her daughter, Gabby, has a bit of the same powers that Charlie's dad did, Andy. So he has the push, but she has to physically be touching people to use it. And there is an instance where something happens in maybe a grocery store or a preschool, and there's a shooting, and Charlie ends up using her powers for the first time in a very long time. Well, we live in a very different day than we used to live in, and so multiple people record this. And then they post it online and say, oh my God, does this woman have these superpowers? And the shop, which is, was defunct for a long time, is starting to rebuild. They're starting to kind of build their own super soldiers, these mutant super soldiers. And they send them after Charlie because they've been looking for Charlie for so long. They see these videos and say, that's Charlie. We're going to go get her. Send her after Charlie. And then Charlie fights back, Gabby. And maybe in the fight, sadly, Andy, the child, is killed, and that sends Charlie over the deep end. I thought maybe one of the little mutants that they create could have time slip powers. I thought that'd be fun. So, they can go back in time just a couple of seconds at a time, but it causes great physical pain to the creature that time travels the longer they go. And so they use that to kind of get the drop on Charlie and Gabby. But then when Charlie finally loses it at the end, I thought it'd be fun if Charlie dies, Andy's dead, it's just Gabby left, and Gabby forces, using the push, to make this creature go back in time far enough. And because it causes great physical pain, I just thought it would be great as a writer to write out the scene of her holding on to this thing, forcing it to go back in time, and as it disintegrates from using the power too much, until we get back to to everything goes black in the story. I talk as like a filmmaker. I'm sorry. I'm a filmmaker at heart and a novelist.
Oh, I love it.
In practice. And so, then we cut to, and we're in a convenience store with Charlie and Andy and Gabby, and they're just talking, and Gabby says, "Oh, hold on, why don't you go first?" and lets the woman behind them go first, and that's where we cut out. And then we finally give Charlie the happy ending she's deserved for so long, because now we know she's going to win that Mega Millions because she let the other person go in front of her. And it's not that, I know Stephen King hates happy endings, so I suspect he would hate that. But hopefully he would love the visuals of Charlie's daughter riding this creature back in time as it disintegrates in just agonizing pain enough that he would be okay with a happy ending for Charlie. Obviously, there's a lot more in there, but that's a beginning and an end for what I would love to see with Charlie if given the thumbs up from Stephen King.
Mr. Ellis, my jaw is on the floor. I'm so happy that you went there. You fulfilled all my dreams by really answering this question with all of your writing power. I'm just, my heart is just gushing. That was incredible. And I know I'm not the only one who would read that today. I would buy that book today.
Well, if we can convince him to let me do it, I would be happy to.
Right? One of these days, I'm telling you, I would love to get writers like yourself, and we're all going to do our fan fiction versions. I'm going to try 250 pages. Everybody gets 250 pages, which I know is...
It's plenty.
Right? And we're going to do a compilation, and we're going to do writers group. This would be so fun. Yes. It is such a fertile field, is it not?
I would absolutely love that. I would love... I've written so many, just for my, since I was a child, written so many stories about King's characters. Roland specifically. I've written so many Roland Deschain characters.
I'm a huge fan of fan fiction. I think it unlocks the imaginations in writers. I love it when students plug in with it. It's a way to practice your writing. It's a way to spend time with your imagination. So I love that you answered the hell out of that question. And I'm so thrilled, beyond thrilled. Thank you so much. I'm buzzing over here. I'm so giddy because of how awesome. Oh my God, that would be so heartbreaking and satisfying and thrilling. And we've got time travel. I feel King would love that ending. I think that he would want Charlie, especially after she's had a bumpy road. I think he'd be okay with this. I'm pretty sure.
I think so too.
Okay, hard to beat that one. Absolutely incredible. But let's jump over to the question about multiple read-throughs. Which would you say are the King titles you've read more than once, the most amount of times? And why is it that you keep coming back to those? And what are these additional reading experiences like?
Number one is by far On Writing. So I read On Writing usually once a year. It was also a book that I listen to it on audiobook more than anything. Usually, sometimes I'll pick it up and read the physical copy for my yearly read through, but usually I'll listen to it just because King narrates it and he tells the story of his life. And it's comforting to me as somebody that didn't have a lot of connections growing up. I didn't have a lot. And so Stephen King books were kind of my outlet. And so that book, hearing about his life a little bit, especially in the narrated version, really just spoke to me and it made me feel like I could actually write books if I wanted to. So yeah, that one's probably number one, definitely number one. And then the second would probably be It. I used to do an annual reading of it, and now it's probably every 2 or 3 years. I'll go back through and read it or listen to it. And then the entire Dark Tower series I try to get to as often as possible. Probably those ones.
Very nice. I do want to ask at this point in time about Stephen King endings. Because as you mentioned, he does get some criticism. I feel it's less as the years go on. I feel like probably in the last decade or so, we haven't heard a lot about that as he has written more crime novels. I feel there's not as much speculation and criticism on the ending. I could be wrong. I could be missing it. But we've got some very large Stephen King titles out there that we invest a lot of our time into or did over the years. So I wanted to ask if there was ever an end to a Stephen King story that was so unsatisfying that it did sully the journey as a whole, or are you someone who just doesn't let that bother them?
I try not to let it bother me, but there are two that stand out a little bit because I enjoyed the book so much that the endings did feel a little bit jarring. And Stephen King is admittedly a pantser. So when he writes, he's a pantser. So he doesn't really plot out endings, which makes it a lot harder to stick the landing on an ending. So you go through on the second draft and you just, sometimes the ending is just good enough, which is tough. Definitely struggle with that myself. I mean, I delayed the release of my latest book a full year because there was one character that I was just like, this isn't right. So I'm going to continue to rewrite this ending until it actually works. He doesn't have to do that. He's Stephen King. Everything else is just so good. So the two that really bother me are Cell and Under the Dome. Under the Dome, because I love that book so much. And I wanted the ending to be as epic as the story. And I think that's often where King runs into his problems is it's very hard to have an ending as epic as the stories he tells, especially in horror. Horror is really difficult because the climax of horror is the scariest part. And so that is hard to replicate at the end of any story. With mystery, as you were saying, with mysteries and thrillers, you can have justice is all you need to wrap up a thriller or a mystery. Is you just have to have some sort of justice, some sort of closure on the case we're working on. With horror, that feels a little, we've defeated the monster or we've exorcised the demons. That doesn't feel as satisfying because of how high that climax is. And I felt like we lost that in Under the Dome with it didn't matter.
I 1000% agree with you. Well, again, this is me being greedy. This is this is like prime example of my greed.
Let's get greedy.
Do you have an alternate ending imagined for Under the Dome?
I used to. I did have something that I thought tied in and worked very well, but I don't remember what it is right now. But if I think of it, I will email you and be like, this is what it was.
Oh, beautiful.
There is a question. I used to do a podcast. I'm actually starting a new podcast soon, but I used to do a podcast where I would talk to people. And one of the questions I asked was if you could rewrite the ending of one of your favorite books, a book that you loved that you didn't love the ending, what would it be? And it's because of Under the Dome. It's because that whole book, I was just like, this is amazing. I feel like he really reached new heights in his exposition in that book because he made you care so much about Barbie and like what was happening in the town. And Jim Rennie is so just vile. Everything worked. And the tension that ratchets with knowing that they're all going to die soon if they don't get out of this thing is so good that to have the ending that it has felt very anticlimactic.
Could not agree more, good sir. I have immense problems. When I think back to Under the Dome, I just remember reading it during COVID, so I scarred myself there. But I also feel like my shoulders slump when I think of Under the Dome. But it's true. Yeah, it's like, oh man, I'm with you.
I would have preferred just no explanation for the dome whatsoever, rather than and I understand like it is a reference to some B movies, some atomic B movies of the 50s and 60s, which he was a huge fan of. So I get that that's where he was going with it, like the whole Rod Serling-ness of it all. But it just, I don't know. I wanted something much more.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel if he was going for that B movie, we could have had a shorter book. We could have had less depth, less power, less intensity, and then we could have went with it. An ending like that, it's like, oh, okay, well, wasn't a lot of time and investment.
Right.
But because we have the opposite, I'm with you. Okay, this question is one of my fun ones, as I like to call them. These little morsels of just pure fun. This one is asking about your favorite Stephen King female.
This one was difficult. You bring up the way Stephen King writes women, and you get very differing responses. Obviously, he started selling his writing to Playboy in the 70s. And so you can feel that, especially in his early writing. And so I did not love the way he wrote women for a very long time. But that being said, there's still a few that just stand out that I think are absolutely amazing. Number one is Rose the Hat. That character is she's just badass from beginning to end. I know a lot of people don't love Dr. Sleep. They feel like the True Knot was wasted on that book, and I totally understand and accept that. But it did give us Rose the Hat, and I think she is just a phenomenally written character. She's terrifying in both action and words, and just the description of her is just amazing in that book. So probably Rose the Hat. Susanna Dean, I love Susanna Dean, specifically Susanna Dean. Odetta Holmes, fine. Detta Walker, fine. But Susanna Dean. Mia, which
I am learning about.
Yes, okay. I don't know how far you are in that particular journey, so I won't say much more. But Susanna Dean, I love as a character because she's kind of the moral center for the Quartet of 19. Jake does his best with it, but it's Susanna that keeps everybody honest, and she's just beautifully written. She's such a complex character because she has Detta Walker inside of her, but she always wants to do the right thing. She wants everyone else to do the right thing. She doesn't accept half-assed responses and excuses. She demands the people in her life to be the best, and I love that. Winifred in The Shining, Wendy in The Shining, in the book, not so much the movie. As much as I loved the performance from Shelley Duvall, that character was not what she was in the book. In the miniseries that they actually shot at the Stanley Hotel, Rebecca De Mornay played Wendy, and she was much closer to the Wendy in the book. But in the book, she's just a better character with a better arc. She's really strong. She's very protective. She's a great mother. She's just very supportive of everything that, she tries to pull Jack back from it rather than being just kind of a victim in the story, which I really liked. So I really loved Wendy in The Shining, and Holly, obviously. Holly's fantastic. And I really like Holly's growth because you get a picture of her in Mr. Mercedes, when she's introduced like halfway through the book. And you think, oh, this is a good, character to just kind of pop in. But then as we go through the Bill Hodges trilogy, she just really starts to grow as a character. He really leans into the struggles that Holly has. And then just by the time we get to like The Outsider, If It Bleeds, and Holly, she's just a full-blown, well-developed, amazing character. Yeah, so Holly for sure. And then Beverly Marsh from It. Yeah, Beverly, I think, was the strongest person in the Losers Club, in the book at least. In the movies, not as much. So they do give her a lot to do in the miniseries that ABC put out years ago. She was a little more. She got to shoot the slingshot and do all the stuff she did in the book, which didn't quite happen in the movie, which Neil McRobert talked about on your show, so I don't need to rehash all of those thoughts. But when I heard it, I was like, yes, Neil, absolutely, exactly how I feel about it.
Neil was pissed.
Yes, and rightfully so.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, especially, he even said, this day and age, this is what we're doing to Beverly Marsh.
Yep. What a stellar list, Mr. Ellis. Oh, wow. Those are some gold medal picks, all of those. Such a good list. I am really worried about Miss Susanna Dean, where I'm at, which isn't super far. I thought I was further, but I'm about halfway.
It's a long book.
Correct. But right now, Mia, I'm getting to know her, and Mia's eating stuff, Mr. Ellis. She is eating things, and she is pregnant, and I am very concerned. I am just worried. Yeah, as a lady, I've never birthed a human child, nor a non-human child. I don't know why I phrased it that way.
That was going to be my follow-up question.
Right? Oh dear, poor choice of words. I haven't birthed anything ever. Thank you. And I just feel such sympathy to any woman who's in that situation, and the fact that, like, oh God, are you human, little fetus? I don't know. So I am in wholehearted agreement of what a fascinating, incredible character she is. And wow, anytime she's on the page, I cannot take my eyes away. I think she's just a powerhouse. What a force.
Amazing. Have you, I don't want to spoil anything or get too in the weeds on this, but have you gotten to the point where Roland and Father Callahan talk about Susanna?
Close. That's a great question.
Okay.
So right now, I am in this beautiful part of Wolves of the Calla where it's Father Callahan telling everybody what's been happening to him. This is such a great part of the book, Kalvin. Like, oh my God, I'm loving every page. So right now, he's telling Roland he's like killing vampires. That's exactly where I'm at. Like, my bookmark is on that chapter right now where he's like, yeah, I stabbed this guy 8 times.
Callahan goes off.
Oh my God, does he? So that's exactly where I'm at right this second. And yeah, so I don't exactly know that part too explicitly, but I'm very excited. And right now I'm just relishing this Father Callahan part so much.
Yes, it's so good. Callahan is one of those characters that, like, after reading Salem's Lot, I would have wanted to know more, and now we get that.
Yeah. Talk about a character who I never knew I would love additional material from. Wow, King really spun straw into gold with this guy. Because, yeah, I mean, we know, I think in Salem's Lot, we get a little bit of an inkling that he does struggle with alcohol, a little bit, but I don't know if it's explored. I could be wrong. I could be dead wrong, actually. But I remember that, yeah, priesty things, and he's a little bit struggling with the sauce there. But to know just how much this guy could bloom in this novel, and wow. So I'm absolutely blown away by what I'm reading at this current time.
It's so beautiful because it really feels like King kind of pulled some of his own experience out and put it into Callahan to be like, oh, yeah, this is how you develop after this disease gets a hold of you, and these are the things that you can do. I just absolutely love what he did with that. It's such a beautiful thing. And you are in for a treat because it's not the only, like, to read The Dark Tower again for the first time.
I know. It is. Oh, anyway, without gushing and going on too much of a tangent, my next question is lined up perfectly because this is my raw reaction question, asking a constant reader simply, what are your thoughts on The Dark Tower?
I love Lord of the Rings, huge Lord of the Rings fan, and it feels like this is Stephen King's homage to that story. It's this epic quest that just stretches across space and time and dimensions. It's beautiful. We're following this person that after the first book, we don't know that we would follow. But then it's some of the most beautiful and brilliant writing. I mean, obviously everybody's got their opinions on the gunslinger. It's just a boring Western about a guy walking across the thing. And then there's the stuff in Tull, which gets a little adventurous, but then it just kind of ends. But, you get the stuff with Jake, but that really sets the hook of who Roland is and how much the tower means to him, which is what it's all about. It's that he understands his mission. And then we understand why he is the way he is after Wizard and Glass. But I think Drawing of the Three is one of the most brilliantly written books I think I've ever read, because you just don't see that coming. When those doors are standing on the sand and he opens it into a 737, 30,000 feet in the air, you feel like he does. In the book, he feels dizzy and disoriented, and that's how we feel reading it because we just don't expect that. It's just beautiful and brilliant. Wasteland's kind of the same thing. You get everything with him and Jake and the split. Yeah, I think the Dark Tower series is just it feels very different, and it pivots after, pivots on Wizard and Glass. But I think it's just our modern day kind of brilliant pieces of fiction, because it is epic and it ends in a way that, well, I won't spoil the ending or say my thoughts on the ending. I do appreciate the ending, but like so many who have been here have said, that last book will get you. It's the first time I ever threw a book.
Okay.
Chapter 19, the people that have made it into Dark Tower chapter 19 will understand why I threw the book, but it is a visceral reaction to that chapter. But yeah, I love the Dark Tower. It holds a special place in my heart. Just outside my office, there's a knit, or not an embroidered thing that says, "As for our house, we serve the beam."
I love it. I do fully understand at this point in my Dark Tower journey. I understand the devotion and being a tower junkie. I get it now. I think a couple years ago when I was just Susie New Kid and I was picking up the Gunslinger, really struggling, and then making my way through drawing of the three, having fun, but still struggling. And then the Wastelands completely smitten, Wizard and Glass shattered into 1,000 pieces.
Yes.
Drying my tears took me months. And now, yeah, I full on feel so connected to other tower junkies. And I know I'm not through the series yet. And I know that I will encounter a lot of emotional hills and valleys.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready. And I love that you described it as an homage to Lord of the Rings, because I know that that's sort of the general consensus, but I'm glad that it is brought up because it is a great way to look at the Dark Tower. Like, this is an epic series of good versus evil with various characters joined together by destiny on literally a road.
Right. And in the Lord of the Rings, it is Frodo's burden to carry the ring. And Roland has that same burden. The tower is his burden. He knows that if he doesn't save it, all universes will fall, not just Midworld, not just his world, not just the world of Eddie, Susanna, and Jake, but all worlds will collapse if he doesn't save it. And that is a heavy burden, and he understands that burden. And so he will let people die in his wake. He'll let Jake fall. There are other worlds than these, Gunslinger, and because he knows that that's his quest. And in that, we hate him a little bit, but we love the others so much, and we love him through them. And so because Jake and Eddie and Susanna start to treat him as their din and their leader, we, as the readers, can do that. And then you get those moments where he's like commanding, like in Wolves of the Calla, when he's talking to them and he's just like, this is who we are. I don't give a shit what you guys think. If it comes to lead, we deal in lead. It's just so brilliantly written that does feel like Lord of the Rings. I'm not saying that the prose match Lord of the Rings, and it is quite the epic tale that Lord of the Rings is, but in my heart and in my mind, they are on equal grounds.
I think you're definitely dead on, because so many things, of course, but I love that you brought up Roland's burden and Frodo's. I don't think I've heard that yet, or I haven't read that yet, and that's really pivotal because I still struggle with following Roland. I love him to pieces, but I think I was struggling to understand why the devotion to the tower. But if it is this heroic journey and this purpose that I'm sure he would give to somebody else if he could, he would pass this fate to someone else if he could. I think that that's becoming more apparent as I go forward. It wasn't for whatever reason. And I think I was having a hard time understanding, like, bro, why?
Like, why do you keep pushing this hard? Why does this mean that much to you? But
yes, why would you sacrifice good people who love you? Why? And I think that's why Wizard and Glass was such a painful endeavor. Not only is it a stunningly beautiful book, very emotional text, but I was just devastated by who gets sacrificed for the tower. And now where I'm at and talking to constant readers and tower junkies like yourself, it helps so much. It really helps solidify the pain, but also understand that it's part of his destiny.
Right. He talks a lot about, I'm not sure if you've gotten there yet, so I won't go into depth, but there's a point in Wolves of the Calla where he talks about Jericho Hill and the loss of Cuthbert and Len and Jamie, and how those were the final gunslingers, and he is the last of his kind and the only person that can do this. And he has to shut himself off. He can't allow people to get inside because he can't ever have somewhere where he has got to make a choice between a sacrifice, because to him it won't be a choice. If he could have saved Susan Delgado, would he have done that? Absolutely. He would have sacrificed the tower for her. But now that he looks back, he knows that that's not an option again, and the pain is going to have to be worth it to him.
Oh, beautifully said. So nice. Thank you for helping. You brought a lot of clarity to my journey, so I appreciate that so much. Okay, we are going to jump to this question about Stephen King's settings. Oh. If you had the magical power to get stuck in a Stephen King setting and write the Firestarter sequel, where would you teleport to for a couple months to write this novel?
The thing about King's settings, there are all these beautiful, amazing places we want to spend time if they weren't so haunted and filled with monsters.
Right.
And so if I could pick one, specifically, whenever I think about going and visiting a place, it's because I'm like, man, it would be nice to write there. The TR-90 from Bag of Bones.
Nice.
Beautiful house up in Maine on a lake, set deep in the trees. Huh, sounds perfect. That is my ideal. If we were removing all the ghosts and stuff, obviously, because, I mean, I think that would be fun. But another one would be like Lisi's story, Booyah Moon.
Yeah.
In Lisi's story. If it wasn't for all like the weird, creepy stuff going on there, that would be, I mean, it was specifically designed for Lisi to go and take breaks and enjoy. So I think that would be a great place if it wasn't for all the creepy people sitting around.
Oh, nice. I'm thrilled to hear Booyah Moon in there. That's a first. I haven't heard that one yet. I love that book.
Me too.
I don't always like it, but I love it. If that makes sense.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
I agree. It was hard not to put her on my top 5. Not that she doesn't deserve to be there, but it's hard for me to pick top anything with King. I just love so much of it.
Oh, same. I struggle most definitely. Okay, this next question is in regards to your favorite Stephen King couple, team, friendship, quartet.
Okay.
What is your favorite cluster in the Stephen King universe?
Cluster. I like that. I'm going to do all 3. Is that okay? I'll do friends, group, and couple.
You've got the spotlight.
Friends for sure. Nick Andros and Tom Cullen.
Oh.
Underrated, I think, in The Stand. They are just the way that Nick just loves Tom and understands Tom in a way that nobody else does is just absolutely beautiful. I love watching those two characters together. And then when the thing happens that I won't spoil, just in case people haven't read The Stand, not that I haven't spoiled enough stuff already, just watch, they always say that if you want somebody to feel a character's death, don't focus on the character, focus on the people that loved that character. And when we see Tom reacting to Nick's death, it is heart-wrenching. And so Tom and Nick, probably my favorite friendship, with honorable mention going to Bill and Richie from It, because they're two very different people that don't get along at all, very, usually, but they have that loyalty and love, which I appreciate. Couple is Jake Epping and Sadie Dunhill from 11/22/63. I love that. And I know people have said that on here before, that they're the favorite couple. It's hard not to love them, and watch them. And then the entire story pivots on that relationship, really, because it's so big. And King must have been thinking when he was writing that book, I have to make this relationship as important in this man's life as the assassination of John F. Kennedy was to the world. And he did that. He made a relationship between two people so important that you were just like, maybe Kennedy could get shot. It's fine. It's just a beautiful relationship. And then for groups, it was a toss-up for me because it was either going to be the Losers Club, but after rambling as long as I did, I think I got to go with the Quartet of 19. Like I have to go with Roland, son of Stephen, Eddie Dean, Susanna Dean, Jake Chambers, and Oi are the best. I think they're my favorite group they're such different characters, all of them. And for all the reasons I just talked about when I was talking about why they would follow Roland, I think they just balance each other out so perfectly.
Oh, well said. Very nice list. Those are some sparkling diamonds in there. Okay, this question is asking about talking with non-Stephen King readers. I know that in the horror community, that's few and far between.
They do exist.
They do. They do every
Mm-hmm.
now and again. And especially with little Gen Alpha coming up and Gen Z, I think they read books. I hope. I don't know. I don't work with a lot. Well, a couple Gen Zs. This question is asking about what are your conversations with non-King readers like? Where would you guide one on the path to maybe introduce his work and ensure that maybe they'll come back for another ride?
So it just really depends on the person. I don't have one standard cookie cutter answer. If they're not fans of horror, but they want to read Stephen King, I'll usually suggest something like The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't throw you into the supernatural deep end. There's touches of it in that book, but it gives you the isolation that King does so well, making you feel these characters just survival alone is their key. So I push people towards Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon a lot, which I love the book. I don't think it's one of his best, but I do enjoy it. I see you've got the pop-up. I also have the pop-up.
Yay!
I love that.
It's so fun.
So much fun. It's such a guilty pleasure just sitting and reading that book. I love that. And so I push that one a little bit. For fans of horror that are like, I hear he's scary. Is he really scary? I push them towards Pet Sematary. Say, try this out. See how you feel about that one. Usually, though, when people are asking about it, I will suggest a short story collection. That way they get a little bit of everything. I feel like even though it's not his best collection, that Everything's Eventual has a little bit of everything he does really well. It's got the story Everything's Eventual, which is really cool. And it's one of those stories where you have to suspend belief for a while because it's just this guy that draws pictures and, people start dying. No explanation of what's happening or why. And so you have to just go with King on that one, which I really love. There's what is the story about the cafe story where it's just bloodshed from beginning to end, which is great. And then you get 1408, which is a beautiful ghost story and just haunting.
Scared the shit out of me.
Oh, so good. So good. Yeah, I think those. So Everything's Eventual is one that I'll suggest sometimes to people. I just ask them, just read the whole book, give them a chance. And then if they like something specific, come back and we'll talk about what's next. And I'll push them in another direction depending on what they enjoyed from that book.
Oh, so smart. I love that strategy. Maybe start with a short story collection and then take the temperature of what they gravitated to. I love that. That's great. I adore that collection. The Man in the Black Suit is one of my all-time favorite.
Mine too.
Oh my God. Does it get any better than that, Kalvin? I mean...
No, I don't think so. The first thing I ever had published, I had a story called Going My Way, published in just like a little literary magazine. And it was my nod to that. And I've never told anyone this. Some people have asked, but never told anybody. The story is about a car accident and this little girl, her parents are dead in this rollover car accident in the middle of Arizona. It's the middle of the desert in Arizona. And she's sitting there and she's crying and a hearse pulls up and a man in a black suit gets out. And the man in the black suit is, in my mind, it is that character because I loved that story so much and just the way he describes like the filed teeth and just haunting and beautiful. I love that story.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you love it and I'm so glad you're inspired. What a beautiful Easter egg. I hope people get their hands on that. That's awesome.
My stories and my novels specifically are so peppered with Stephen King Easter eggs. One of my favorite things is when people will message and be like, I caught this. Some of them are not well hidden. Like I have a character in my first book, his dog's name is Torrance. And it even calls out that the character says, usually you would name your dog Cujo, but I went with Torrance. And one of the main characters in my second book, his name is Derry. It's spelled Derry. I don't hide my love for King well.
I don't think you have to. Let that light shine. No need to hide it. We have just a couple more. We are moseying along here. Do you have, Mr. Ellis, a favorite Stephen King animal or pet?
I mean, I've heard people say things other than oi, and I just don't understand. How can oi not be your favorite
Yeah,
animal of all time? Not just
right.
in Stephen King, but oi is just he's the bestest boy.
Yeah.
He's the bestest oi. And where you're at now, he's great, and he just gets better. I cried listening to your Neil McRobert episode when Neil was talking about Oi the Brave of
Yeah.
Midworld. I'm going to get teary-eyed now thinking about it. I
Yeah.
messaged Neil right after that episode, and I was just like, "Thanks a lot, man. I'm in tears, crying because of what you said about Oi.
Try to be professional over here.
How did you manage?"
It was sloppy,
Oh,
Mr. Ellis. It was rough.
oh, so beautiful. Just like I love, for one, I love hearing about people appreciating good art, and I think that Oi being written as beautifully as he was is definitely beautiful art. But it's also, there's something about the King community and the book community in general that just makes you feel connected. And in that moment, I felt connected to you and Neil, but I just felt so connected because of
Oh,
this imaginary animal that Billy Bumblers don't even exist, and yet we all had this. So I only imagine that tons of other people felt the same way, and that's the power of writing. That's the power of Stephen King. That's the power of what you're doing right now, and it's a beautiful thing to build this kind of community and share this love for this make believe animal. So he's great at writing animals, the love of animals, but Church. I had a cat named Church for quite some time, but Oi is number one in my heart and always will be. I can't imagine anyone writing a character pet in a book that I loved more than I love Oi.
I'm getting choked up just listening to you now. So I think Oi has the universal power of making me cry now. I think that's like a thing. Anytime he's made some stellar moments in Wolves of the Calla thus far, and I notice that after I read them, there's an audible squeal that comes out of my mouth. I'm at that stage of my readership where it's like, oh, I will kill anyone who hurts Oi. I
Yes.
mean, Jake too. I'm really getting very
Mm-hmm.
territorial. I'm very mama
Yes.
bear for everyone, but he's so smart. He's such a good
Yeah.
boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The stuff in the Wastelands where he leads Roland through after Gasher when he takes Jake is just beautiful and brilliant, and you're just like, Oi is a badass. Oi is a little badass, and he knows exactly what to do. And then he goes in and he attacks the TikTok man, and just such a great scene. I mean, all of Oi's scenes are great. And then because Jake loves him so much, it's hard not to love him as well.
What a stellar answer. I'm sure many agree with you. Many.
If they don't, I would love to hear their answers because
Right? I mean, Oi is really hard to beat. He really, really is. I tell you. My answers, well, they don't even beat Oi, but I don't even know how to express. I remember the dogs that have passed. I remember all the dogs he kills.
yeah,
Those stay with me
which
a
he does
lot
a lot.
longer. Right.
Yeah.
I still think about the one that, oh, what's his ass? Dead Zone.
Oh yeah, Stilson kills. The kicks to death.
Thank you.
Greg Stilson. Greg.
Right. I think about Greg
Yeah.
Stilson and I think about Mr. Chips. I think
Mm-hmm.
about there's a horrible scene in Under the Dome when one is just shot
Yes.
point blank. I don't know. I feel like if I remember that, this is probably my own dark psychology, my own hangups, but I mourn them. And so I hold on to their memory and I
Yeah.
think about them to like try and I don't know. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what that's about. Another day, but
Well, it's like he knows too. He knows when he writes dogs being killed that you're going to respond that way. I respond the same way. I think we all do because dogs are the most perfect thing in the world. And
yes,
when you kill one in fiction, it hurts. We feel it in real life.
we do.
There's the book Save the Cat, and so he's doing the exact opposite. He's showing, you can be the worst hero in the world as long as you're willing to save the cat. At the beginning, you show them doing something altruistic, then because it's a pet, you know that they're capable of good. So if you still see somebody like Greg Stilson kick a dog to death in the opening chapters of the book, you think, oh yeah, I can never trust this guy. And that gives us the same insight into him as John Smith gets from his psychic ability. All we had to do was watch him kick a dog to death. It's brilliant, but it's emotional manipulation, Mr. King. I won't stand for it.
Right. Mr. Ellis, you are spitting mad game on the fiction craft. I love it. I love what I'm hearing. Oh my goodness. Well, if this writer thing, you could always teach with the rest of us. You're ready. You're ready for that classroom. I'm serious.
I do teach a writer's.
I knew it. I know a teacher.
I will teach I have a workshop, a writer's workshop that I teach for middle school and high school kids. I only do it a couple times a year for a couple schools that reached out and asked, but I do love it. I do love talking about the craft. I love mentoring writers. Just the craft of storytelling in general, I just adore.
I can tell you're one of us. One of us.
Yes, exactly.
So awesome. I love it. I found it. I'm like, look at this guy. Look at this fiction teacher right here. Love it. Love it. Just a couple more, and then we are on our way out. This is a question in regards to Stephen King signed titles. I don't know if you possess one of these treasures already, but if you had the opportunity to get one, just one signed from Mr. King, what's going to be the title?
I struggle with this because, like, I've heard you ask this question, and I loved everyone's answers. Mine would either be on writing, because it means so much to me. And as a writer, I think it would mean the world to have that. But it is probably, that book literally saved my life.
Yeah.
We talked about reading it at 8 years old. Bill Denborough was the first character it was the first time in a book where I ever realized I could relate to somebody. Because I had, when I was younger, I watched my younger brother drown in front of me. And when he died, I thought, nobody knows how this feels. Like, at 4 years old, I thought I was the only person in the world who ever had a sibling die. And so then fast forward 4 years, and I'm reading this story about Bill Denborough watching Georgie die. And I genuinely, when you're that age, the world seems very small. I genuinely thought Stephen King wrote this story about me. And so I'm just like, oh, I'm stuttering Bill. I'm Bill Denborough. And that played a lot into who I am now. I wanted to be the good guy. I wanted to be the hero. I wanted to be Bill Denborough. And so having a signed copy of it from Stephen King, specifically a personalized signed copy, would just be, I think, my greatest possession.
I think many would agree. I'm with you on the Bill Denborough love. I'm with you. I think that he speaks to the traumatized kid in a lot of us.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of traumatized kids out there, sadly. And there's something about Bill. Not always. I think depends on the person who they're going to gravitate to in the Losers Club. And my book club's reading it for the very first time. Oh my gosh, Kalvin, you would love my book club because brand new King readers, and some of them are reading it for the first time. The first time.
My heart.
Yes, it is such a magical. Oh, wow. It is so awesome to be with these folks on this journey. But we're talking a lot about who everybody's identifying with. And I asked everyone to take notes. Who are you gravitating towards? And let's sort of unpack that. There's a lot of psychology sort of brewing about, because childhood is, it is something we all experience. And some people have, even the most privileged among us, it's a hard time. There's great discomfort, and I can't imagine. Thank God we weren't kids when the internet was around. And I think Gen Alpha, Gen Z have a lot more challenges, different challenges.
Yeah.
We were latchkey kids. We were children of the streets. And so that created a lot of rebellion and brazenness and freedom and, a host of things. But we also got in a lot of trouble. We got hurt. We rebelled and had things happen to us. And there's a lot of secrets, and not everything's on camera and on tape. And there wasn't a lot of advocacy. I could go on and on. But anyway, long story short, I think it's a beautiful choice. And I think many would agree that it's a cornerstone book. This is a work that, and I'm trying to explain this to my book club. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the novel. This is something that people hold so close to their heart because of what's found inside this story and these characters. So it's top of mind, hence my little tangent.
I love it. I can't imagine. Can you imagine if you wrote a book that just impacted the world so much, and then you did it multiple times? Because The Shining, The Stand, these are all books that are just so impactful. And in anyone else's career, they would be, easily their greatest accomplishment, and he's just got multiple. And it should be taught for generations to come about, I mean, the story itself is about carrying trauma. And once we share our trauma with others, we're connected. And that trauma manifests in Pennywise, but each one of them have this very specific type of abuse or neglect that they go through. I talk a lot about it. I work with foster kids and stuff, and we talk about how we find our ways in to discuss things about their abuse and neglect without bringing up the abuse and neglect. And it did so much for me in giving me like a language to be like, okay, well, I don't understand what your experience is, but I've read a story about this. And obviously you don't say that to a 7-year-old who's gone through that kind of abuse, but it definitely helped prepare me to be like, okay, well, tell me about that. And here's something about myself that I could share with them to kind of open them up and get them speaking a little more freely. And it's because of that book, because they have all the different types of trauma in the Losers Club. And then we get Henry Bowers and Patrick Hockstetter outside the Losers Club, which whole other story, but that is how you don't deal with trauma.
Correct.
You turn it into a negative thing, whereas our friends in the Losers Club, they give it to each other and they share that trauma. And, you know, the cutting of the hands and sharing of the blood is kind of just a symbolic way to say, hey, I'm giving my problems and my pain to you, and I'm taking yours too, so that we're all carrying it together, which is just absolutely beautiful. I'm rambling again. I'm sorry.
No, it's not a ramble if it's good, buddy. It's not a ramble if I'm hanging on every word, which I am. So by all means, we have, let's see here on my little listy list. I think we got two more. We got two more. This next one is very new. This is a new question. And this is my I accidentally got a crush on Billy Summers, and so I want to ask.
That's no accident.
Right? I am smitten kitten for that character.
Oh, I love that character so much.
Me too.
I'll watch that character, just like that whole book is just about Billy's day every day, and I love it. I was hanging on every word.
Samesies, I am just, wow, I want to go on a date with that guy. I have a super mega crush on Billy Summers. Never happened before. So this question is born from that, asking others, hey, did this happen to anybody else in your King reading? Have you ever got a crush on a character, romantic attraction towards somebody?
Yes. My very first crush was Beverly Marsh. Reading that book at 9 years old, I read it and I had a huge crush on Beverly Marsh because she was compassionate and kind, but didn't take shit. She was protective of the others, including Bill, who, you know, Bill's everybody's leader, but Beverly's the one he can lean on when he needs her. And that was just something I was lacking in my life when I was younger, is people to lean on. And so Beverly just became my big crush. And then I carried that over, and I met a young girl when I was in elementary school that had similar, and then that became my first actual crush because of Beverly Marsh. So yeah, since I've been an adult, I mean, maybe Susanna Dean a little bit.
Yeah.
For probably the same reasons, is that she cares for Eddie, who's a very flawed person, but still just loves him and never holds his trauma against him, which I really appreciated. So I'd say Beverly Marsh when I was a kid as my first crush, and then Susanna Dean as a younger man. Oh, and Sadie, probably.
Oh, Sadie's so great. You brought up Susanna, and of course I'm just spiraling in awesome ways. As I'm thinking about, oh yeah, Susanna's amazing. And I'm like, Susanna has no legs. And yeah. I love that as somebody, there are so many aspects to this woman. I never remember that. Because she is so bombastic and wild and fun and free. She's never limited by her disability ever. And she is just so cool. And I'm like, oh yeah, she's the best. She absolutely is
awesome. Yeah.
The coolest.
And you never think about it in terms of Susanna doesn't have legs. You see other characters responding to it as, well, now we have to do this thing for Susanna because she, and Susanna's like, I don't need you to do that for me. So the other characters think about it more than she does, which I think is just crazy cool.
It is. And it's something that now that I am reading about her and I am spending time with her, I am thinking about her a lot more, and I'm just in awe. Every book, I love her more and more, but now that stuff's happening, like we're getting a lot of screen time with Susanna, she is top of mind lately, and I'm like, gosh, you are the coolest. You really are.
She really is.
Wow. Wow. So yeah, thank you for talking about this.
Anytime.
All right, my friend, this is our final question. Tell me your top 5 Stephen King titles. They can be novels, short story collections, novellas. This is the top 5 shelf.
Okay. This one's hard.
It is. You are welcome to have honorable mentions.
Okay, that helps. I'm going to cheat a little bit.
That's fine.
It is number 1, for sure. And now you said collections, right? I can pick a collection?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to take the entire Dark Tower series as a collection.
I like what you did there.
The Shining, probably number 3. See, now I'm starting to question my decisions. Bag of Bones, probably number 4, which is, I know, very high for Bag of Bones, but I love a good ghost story. And then Pet Sematary. Maybe Pet Sematary 4 and Bag of Bones 5. And then honorable mention is On Writing, just because since it's not a fiction, it is a book very near and dear to my heart, and I love reading it, and I love, as a writer, it helps me a great deal. I think of Stephen King, you think narrative fiction, and so those are my top 5 narrative fiction Stephen King collections and or novels.
Oh, wonderful list. That's a good one. That really is a nice list. At this point in time, Mr. Ellis, I know everybody wants to be your best friend. Like now, they're feeling it. They're like, I gotta look up Kalvin Ellis. I could feel it. I feel this. I need to be best buddies with this guy. For those who aren't familiar with your work, can you let everybody out there know what you're up to? Because I think you're headed to King Con next month, yes?
I am. I'm going to be one of the VIPs at King Con, the first annual King Kong.
I'm sure you're not the first to say it, right?
I'm sure it happens a lot. I think that probably is going to happen a lot while we're there too. But
yeah,
it'll be in Vegas the last week of October, right before 24th through the 27th of October. I'll be at King Kong Con. I just said it. I was even focused on not saying it, and I said King Kong again. The King Convention. So I'll be there. I'll be doing some panels talking about both writing and Dollar Baby Film Club. I don't know if you're familiar with the Dollar Babies.
Oh, yeah.
I was honored to write, produce, and direct Dollar Babies film myself years ago. I did Big Driver, which was risky, and I did it right before Lifetime made the movie. So it was an interesting process. We could talk hours about that. And so I'll be talking about that on a panel, and I'll be talking about writing on panels and be selling some books. My first 3 books. I have a series called the Paisley Mott series, In the Hills Above the Gristmill and In the Grave Where the Bones Are Still Wet. I'll have those for sale at King Con. And I wrote a middle grade fiction book for Fright Vision, which will also be for sale then. And as far as writing, I'm working on a 90s camp slasher right now, working on the 3rd Paisley Mott book, and working on a short story collection.
Oh, beautiful. That's going to be awesome. I'm so excited. Congratulations. You deserve a place of honor among the King folk.
Thanks. It's my favorite community.
It's mine too. Oh man, I'm with you. I'm going to try to make it work because Las Vegas is my favorite place in the world. And the fact that I have Las Vegas and Stephen King sandwiched together, it's making my brain explode. I'm trying so hard to make it work, but my personal schedule, I might not be able to catch this first one. But please say hi to my friend Jonathan Jans and Julia Marquesi.
I will say hi to both of them.
If I don't make it, because if I do make it, I'm going to be in line at your booth to sign all my books, and then I'll go get my signed books from everybody else. But yeah, you'll be first. Mega congratulations. That's going to be awesome. So for those listening out there, you can see Mr. Kalvin Ellis in Las Vegas for the first inaugural King Con. I think this is the first one, yeah?
It is, yeah.
Very cool. And then your website is?
KalvinEllis.com.
Perfect.
Yeah,
I'll have that listed so you can say hi to Kalvin. And so before we head out of here, I noticed that Kalvin is a big fan of DC, specifically Superman, and we got to talk about it a little bit because I grew up with brothers, and I didn't get the opportunity to watch My Little Pony and all the other shows that I wanted to. I had to watch Batman the Animated Series and Superman, and oh my God, there's nothing that beats it.
Top tier, yeah.
Yeah, so I'd say that I'm well versed in the DC world. So I did want to ask about your love of the man from Krypton, Kal-El.
Sure thing. You did catch it. Not many people do. That my name, Kalvin Ellis, is a pen name. When my son, his name is Jordan, when he was born, he's 22 now. When he was born, I tried to name him Kalvin Ellis, and my ex-wife said no. Well, she said yes. And then my stepdad was like, "Oh, you're naming him after Superman," and explained it. And then I wasn't allowed to. So when I was writing, because as I mentioned, I worked with foster kids and stuff. I'm a CASA, and the judge said, if you're going to write horror books, maybe you should have a pen name. And so I said, okay. And my son was like, well, what? You couldn't name me Kalvin Ellis. Why don't you name yourself Kalvin Ellis? Oh. And so he did. And that love of Superman came from, sorry, I'm going to get depressing again. When I mentioned my brother drowned when I was 4, the night his body was recovered, we were at the sheriff's department, and we were homeless before that. And so I had never really watched TV or anything. And so we're sitting in the sheriff's department, and the Christopher Reeve Superman movie was playing in the sheriff's department. And I had just lost my brother and I couldn't save him. And so I decided at that moment that I wanted to be Superman and never let anyone hurt somebody I cared about again. Right. And so I've lived my life by that. Very similar to the way Christians look up to Christ, I look up to Superman. I want to be Superman-like. I know I will never be Superman, but as long as I live my life in a way that honors Superman, then I feel like I'm living a good life. And so I wear a Superman ring I've worn it every single day for I think 18 years now. And I'm a big fan of the Man of Steel and what he stands for. And I'm a big fan of hope and optimism. And I think, which is weird, you mix that with horror, but if you're reading my books, I think it comes through a little bit, and my main character pays them off for that particular series. So I love Superman. I mean, I love all comics, and I'm a huge comic book nerd, and one of the big things I do is sit on the board for an organization that teaches education through comic books and stuff. Do you mind if I plug it real quick? Because I think
Please do.
Thank you. It's called Pop Culture Classroom, and you can find it at popcultureclassroom.org. We create media that help people learn. People that struggle with dyslexia or any sort of learning struggles, we create media, board games, movies, and stuff to help them learn. But we also teach things that you might not learn in school. So we have a whole Colorful History, which is a comic book that we produce about Black Wall Street and a bunch of other things that people don't really get to learn about in school. So, and we offer those as free resources to teachers. They also created Denver Comic Con. When Denver Comic Con started, we started that. So mixes two of my passions, education and comic books and nerdy pop culture stuff. So they get to meld together nicely.
Oh my goodness. I love that. Thank you for sharing these memories with us and with me. I am so appreciative, and I think I'm immensely grateful for the King community, because I think we always embrace each other. No matter how dark and scary it gets, I think that even though we might not know each other well, we're immediately there for each other. Mr. Ellis, I hope you have an amazing King Con. You'll have to report back.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much for being an incredible Constant Reader interview.
Thank you. This has been so much fun.
Good.
I love talking about Stephen King. This is great.
Me too. I can't stop. Take care, and we'll talk to each other soon.
Thank you so much.
Okay, everybody. That concludes my lovely time with horror fiction author Mr. Kalvin Ellis. Many thanks and huge hugs to Kalvin for really bringing his A game and being so open for all of us. Wasn't that so special, dear ones? I am so moved, and I feel so privileged to be a part of the powerful recollections in these Constant Reader interviews. I tell ya, it never gets old. It's a true honor. Please visit Kalvin's website, which I have listed in the show notes. Get your hands on his novels and sign up for his newsletter as soon as possible. Whew, dear buddies, let me tell you, these last 4 months, specifically the last 2 months, have anthropomorphized into a Burmese python that has me completely in its coil. It was slow at first, wrapping around my feet, then my torso, and for the last week or so, it's constricting my entire body and my airway is pinched. My crazy, unhinged, busy schedule is in full python form, but once November gets here, the python gets wrangled and caged, and I'll be able to breathe normally and focus on what I really want to do, which is provide everyone with my thoughts on Wolves of the Calla. It has been a long time coming, and I'm ready, buddies. Ooh, I'm ready to go. I'm trying to keep all my emotion in a box until I record, but I'm flippin' bursting over here, guys. What a ride. For those of you who enjoyed this interview and have liked the content featured on the Year of Underrated Stephen King podcast, please check out what I've been up to on my Patreon, The Danse Macabre with Kim C. Over there, I'm prioritizing Stephen King short fiction, Stephen King females, and lots of other extra special chit-chat sessions with rad people. I would love to have you hang out with me on the Patreon and experience Kim C after hours, when classes are over and I'm seated at the bar with a wine glass in hand, ready to tell you all about it. Please visit patreon.com/dancewithkimc. That's dance with an S. For those of you who haven't subscribed to the show on YouTube, let's go ahead and do that. I'm also on all of the socials minus TikTok. Not on TikTok, but I'm usually bopping around on Instagram and X, so please feel free to say hi and follow me on there. Or you can write to me at underratedsk@gmail.com, where I will promptly respond back to you. It's so great hearing from listeners near and far and learning about your history with King, what King title you're currently reading, as well as your thoughts on the show. Please do not be a stranger. Definitely say hi if you've been listening for a while. It's so great knowing you're out there. With that, sweet people, I take my exit. Next episode, by hell or high water, will be my thoughts on Wolves of the Calla, followed by my long-awaited return to Hemmingford Home and the world of Captain Trips. And if you're on the Patreon, I'm working my way through Nightmares and Dreamscapes for the very first time, and I would love it if you would join me on that endeavor. Thank you all so very much for listening. I appreciate you all so much. I hope everyone has a nice Halloween, a festive Dia de los Muertos, and that November brings good weather, highly caloric snacks, and hopefully a bit of rest. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.